Picture this, you're pulling in a solid $120,000 to $180,000 a year household income. You've got a $450,000 to $600,000 house in a decent suburb, a reliable car or two, and the kids are in good public schools. On paper, you're solidly middle class, maybe even upper middle. You've made it, or so it seems. But then why does every month feel like a tightrope walk? Why do you hesitate to book that family vacation second guess, adding another kid to the mix, or stick with a job that's burning you out because one wrong move could derail everything? This is the harsh reality of house poor in 2026, a trap where 40 to 55% of your after-tax income pours straight into housing costs, leaving you asset-rich on paper, building equity in the home, but cash flow poor, freedom poor, and options poor in real life. You own the house, but it owns your budget, your choices, and your peace of mind. Let's look at the numbers driving this epidemic. The median U.S. home price in 2026 is hovering around $430,000 to $450,000, up slightly from 2025 per Redfin and Zillow forecasts. Mortgage rates are stuck at 6.2 to 6.9% for 30-year fixed loans. And according to the Harvard Joint Center for Housing Studies, a record 35 to 40% of American households are now spending more than 30% of their income on housing, with middle-class families, $75,000 to $200,000 earners hit the hardest. In 2026, millions of middle-class families are getting crushed by house poor, not because they splurged on a mansion, but because they bought a reasonable home that the math simply doesn't support for a comfortable life. High rates, stagnant wages averaging 2 to 4% growth after inflation, and rising costs like insurance and taxes are turning what should be a milestone into a millstone. Today we're diving into the 8 key signs and root causes of house poor for middle-class families, from income percentages that trap you to lifestyle cuts that steal your joy, and most importantly, practical ways to escape or avoid it before it's too late. If you're grinding through mortgage payments and feeling the squeeze, or eyeing a $400,000 to $600,000 home thinking this is our step-up, stick around. This could be the wake-up call that saves your finances from years of quiet regret. Let's start with the most obvious sign: when housing devours 40 to 55% of your take-home pay. To understand why house poor is crushing so many middle-class families right now, we need to look at the economic backdrop of 2026 to 2027. The median U.S. home price is sitting around $430,000 to $450,000, up only modestly 2 to 4% from 2025, according to the latest Redfin, Zillow, and NAR data. That sounds stable, but when you pair it with mortgage rates still locked in the 6.2 to 6.9% range for 30-year fixed loans, the monthly payment is 50 to 100% higher than what buyers were seeing in 2020 to 2022, when rates were 2.5 to 3.5%. A $450,000 home with 10% down at 6.7% today costs roughly $2,900 to $3,100 just for principal and interest, before taxes, insurance, or maintenance. Meanwhile, the median household income in the U.S. is approximately $81,000 to $85,000 gross U.S. Census and BLS estimates. After taxes, that leaves most families with $60,000 to $70,000 take-home per year, or about $5,000 to $5,800 per month. Put a $450,000 to $550,000 home on top of that, and suddenly 40 to 50% or more of take-home is gone just to keep the roof over your head. The latest numbers from Harvard's Joint Center for Housing Studies show 32 to 38% of all American households now spend more than 30% of their income on housing, the highest levels in decades. Middle-class earners, $80,000 to $200,000 gross, make up the largest share of this group. They're not buying luxury homes, they're buying reasonable $400,000 to $600,000 houses in decent suburbs, yet the math still crushes them. Why is this happening more than ever? Inflation in housing costs, property taxes, homeowners, insurance, utilities, maintenance is running 5 to 15% per year in many markets, far outpacing average wage growth of 2 to 4% after inflation. A family earning $150,000 gross buys a $500,000 home with 10 to 15% down arrow. Their full PT plus maintenance often hits $4,000 to $5,000 per month, 40 to 50% of take-home. One insurance spike tax reassessment or repair bill later, and the budget is underwater. This isn't about reckless spending. It's about a structural mismatch, housing costs rising faster than incomes rates staying high, and middle-class families stretching to keep up, only to end up house poor. Now let's go straight to the clearest sign you're in the trap. The number one most unmistakable sign you're house poor is simple and brutal. 40 to 55% or more of your after-tax income is disappearing into housing costs every month. The traditional safety rule used by financial planners, lenders, and even HUD is that total housing principal, interest, taxes, insurance, plus realistic maintenance should be no more than 28 to 30% of your gross household income. That's the front-end ratio most experts consider sustainable. In 2026 reality, a huge number of middle-class families buying $450,000 to $600,000 homes are blowing past that. They're spending 40 to 55% of take-home pay on housing, sometimes more. Let's run the numbers for a realistic example. A household earning $150,000 gross per year, solid middle-class income in most metros. After federal/state taxes, FICA, and typical deductions, moderate tax state take-home is roughly $9,000 to $10,000 per month. Now buy a $500,000 home with 10 to 15% down at 7% interest, principal and interest $2,900 to $3,100 per month. Property taxes $400 to $600 per month, 1.0 to 1.4% average. Homeowners insurance $200 to $400 per month, rising fast. Maintenance and repairs 1.5 to 2% of value per year, $625 to $833 per month averaged. HOA/utilities bump $100 to $300 per month. Total all-in housing cost $4,000 to $5,500 per month, often landing at $4,300 to $4,800. That's 43 to 53% of take-home pay, right in the house poor zone. What's left for everything else? $420 to $570 per month to cover food, cars, insurance, childcare, retirement savings, emergencies, kids' activities, debt payments, and any shred of enjoyment. After the basics, there's often very little buffer. No meaningful extra to max 401ks beyond the match tiny emergency fund. Constant stress if a repair or medical bill hits. The consequence is immediate and compounding. You can't safely max retirement contributions. Emergency savings stay weak or get raided. Every month feels like survival mode. This isn't rare. It's the norm for millions who bought reasonable homes in the current rate/price environment. When housing eats 40 to 55% of take-home, you're not living comfortably, you're enduring. The next sign builds on this when you realize you're afraid to make big life changes because the house payment owns you. The second clearest sign you're house poor is this gut punch feeling you don't dare quit or change jobs, even when the current one is toxic, soul-crushing, or underpaying you. When 40 to 50% of your take-home pay is locked into the mortgage, taxes, insurance, and maintenance, the house becomes your golden handcuffs. One missed paycheck, 1 month of reduced income, or one gap between jobs could start a cascade. late payments, credit score damage, foreclosure risk. So you stay. You stay in a job you hate. You stay with a boss who belittles you. You stay in a role that's stalling your career because the alternative, even a short unemployment period, feels impossible. It gets worse when the new opportunity is out of town or in another state. Selling the house takes 3 to 6 months, costs 5 to 6% in commissions, plus closing fees and repairs, easily $30,000 to $50,000 on a $500,000 home. You have to time the sale perfectly, coordinate moving, and hope the market doesn't dip. Most people just don't. They pass on the promotion, the better salary, the dream role, because moving means risking everything they've built. Personal example I hear all the time. You hate your job, the stress is killing you, the pay is mediocre, but you can't quit. You run the numbers, if you lose income for even 2 to 3 months, you're underwater on bills. So you stay. Year after year. Renters. They have far more flexibility. Month-to-month or year-to-year leases mean they can move quickly for a better job, a new city, a fresh start. No 5 to 6% selling penalty. No months of staging and showings. They can chase opportunities without the house holding them hostage. This is emotional and psychological damage on top of financial. You're not just paying a mortgage, you're paying with your mental health, your career growth, and your ability to say yes to better paths in life. The trap isn't just the money, it's how it locks you in place. Next sign when you realize you're too scared to take any real financial risks, and your wealth building is grinding to a halt. The third major sign you're house poor is this slow, quiet realization you've stopped taking any real financial risks, and your path to building wealth has become painfully slow. When 40 to 55% of take-home is eaten by housing, there's very little margin left for aggressive wealth-building moves. You can't afford to invest the difference between owning and renting, because there is no difference left. Instead, that $800 to $1,500 monthly gap, the extra you pay over renting a similar place, gets swallowed by the mortgage, taxes, insurance, and repairs. That money, if invested at a realistic 7 to 9% long-term return, S&P 500 average after fees/taxes, would compound massively. Quick math on a typical $500,000 home scenario: down payment locked $50,000 to $100,000, could have grown to $100,000 to $200,000 plus in 10 years at 7 to 9%. Monthly difference versus rent, $800 to $1,500 extra. Invested consistently over 10 years at 8% average adds $150,000 to $300,000 plus compounded. Total opportunity lost $200,000 to $400,000 in liquid wealth after a decade. That's real money. Money that could fund early retirement, kids' college, a business startup, or just financial security. Instead, it's tied up in illiquid home equity that you can't easily access without selling and paying on another 8 to 10% in transaction costs. Beyond the dollars, the behavior changes. You don't dare start that side business, too risky if it takes time to pay off. You avoid learning high upside skills that might require unpaid time or courses. You skip aggressive investing, individual stocks, crypto, real estate deals because you can't afford volatility when the mortgage is breathing down your neck. You play it ultra safe, max the 401k match if any, park the rest in low yield savings and hope for the best. Renters who invest the difference, they have higher liquidity and higher risk tolerance. They can afford to take calculated shots at higher returns because their monthly nut is lower. Over time, many pull ahead in net worth, not because they're smarter, but because they have breathing room. House poor doesn't just slow your wealth, it shrinks your ambition, your upside, and your future options. Next, the lifestyle cuts that make you feel like you're living smaller than your income suggests. The fourth sign your house poor hits you in the gut. Your lifestyle starts feeling smaller and more restricted than your income level should allow. You're making decent money, maybe $120,000 to $180,000 household, yet every decision gets filtered through. Can we swing this without risking the mortgage, long vacations? Maybe once every few years, and even then it's a budget trip or staycation. Eating out regularly, cut back to once or twice a month. Kids' extracurriculars, sports music lessons, tutoring scaled down or skipped because we can't afford the extra $200 to $400 per month right now. Hobbies that cost money, golf gym memberships. Weekend getaways, upgrading tech, put on hold or abandoned. And the big one many don't talk about, openly delaying or rethinking having another child because the numbers just don't add up. Childcare, extra bedroom space, higher food/activities bill. It all feels impossible when 40 to 55% of take-home is already gone to housing. You look around at your beautiful house and think, this place is amazing, but we're living like we make a lot less than we do. It's not that you're broke. It's that the house has quietly taken over your life choices. You're not broke on paper. You have equity, a deed, a nice address. But in practice, you're making trade-offs that feel like poverty, skipping experiences, delaying dreams, shrinking joy to fit the budget. Renters in similar income brackets often have the opposite. Lower fixed costs mean more margin for travel, hobbies, kids, and spontaneity. They don't feel locked into a lifestyle downgrade just to keep the roof. This is the emotional weight of house poor. The house looks like success from the outside, but inside it feels like survival mode. Beautiful walls, but a smaller life. The next signs are subtler, but they compound the problem. Here are 4 more signs that you're deep in house poor territory. These are the ones people often notice last, but they're just as telling. Sign number 5, weak/non-existent emergency fund, plus frequently using credit cards for repairs. You know you should have 3 to 6 months or more of expenses saved, but the reality is a tiny emergency fund, or none at all. When the AC dies, roof leaks, or car needs major work, you reach for credit cards, 18 to 25% interest, or pull from retirement accounts, taxes plus penalties. Repairs aren't rare, they're inevitable, but being house poor means you're never ahead enough to handle them without going into debt. It's a cycle, one big bill to credit card debt to higher monthly payments to even less buffer next time. Sign number 6, afraid to take long vacations/fear of losing income. Vacation days pile up unused because what if something happens while I'm gone? You skip long trips, sabbaticals, or even taking sick days because the house payment is non-negotiable. Many house poor families work through burnout because the alternative, even a short income dip, feels too risky. Sign number 7, constant worry about interest rates rising or taxes/insurance increasing. You live with constant low-level anxiety about the what-ifs. What if rates reset higher if you have an ARM or need to refinance? What if property taxes jump after reassessment? What if insurance spikes another 20 to 30% at the next renewal? You're not paranoid. These are real risks in 2026 to 2027. But the fear keeps you up at night knowing one big increase could push you over the edge. Sign number 8, the feeling of rich on paper but poor in reality. This is the most insidious one. Your net worth looks good. Home equity plus 401k, but you feel broke. You can't access the equity without selling and paying 8 to 10% fees. You can't spend it. You can't borrow against it cheaply. So you're rich on the balance sheet, but living paycheck to paycheck in practice. The classic house poor contradiction. These signs don't happen overnight. They creep in. But once they're all present, you're not just paying a mortgage. You're paying with your peace, your options, and your future. Now let's talk about why this is happening to so many middle-class families in 2026, and what the root causes really are. So why are millions of middle-class families, people earning $80,000 to $200,000 doing everything right, ending up house poor in 2026? It's not because they bought mansions or made reckless choices. It's because of a perfect storm of structural and behavioral factors that turn reasonable homeownership into a trap. Root cause number 1. Buying a just-right home that still exceeds real affordability. Most people target $450,000 to $600,000 homes because they feel achievable, not luxury but a step up from renting. But the full cost PT plus 1.5 to 2% maintenance plus higher utilities pushes monthly expenses to $3,800 to $5,500, eating 40 to 55% of take-home. The house is just right on Zillow, not in the budget. Root cause number 2, high interest rates plus inflation in housing costs. Rates at 6.2 to 6.9% mean payments are 50 to 100% higher than 2020 to 2022. On top, property taxes, homeowners insurance, and utilities are rising 5 to 15% per year in many markets, far outpacing average wage growth of 2 to 4% after inflation. A $500,000 home that felt manageable at closing becomes crushing after 3 to 5 years of increases. Root cause number 3, low down payments leading to larger loans. Many first-time and middle-class buyers put down only 5 to 15% to get in. That means bigger loans to higher principal and interest to less equity early, to more vulnerability to rate/inflation shocks. Root cause number 4, no house hacking or strategic location choice. Few middle-class buyers house hack rent rooms, build ADU by duplex. They pick homes in high-cost suburbs with rising taxes/insurance instead of growth areas where appreciation offsets costs. No rental income arrow, full burden falls on one household. Root cause number 5, wages not keeping pace with housing inflation. Middle-class income growth is slow, 2 to 4% real. Housing costs explode faster, creating a widening gap that turns affordable into stretched. These aren't personal failures, they're systemic. Middle-class families are being squeezed by an economy where housing costs rise faster than earnings rates stay high, and normal homes now demand too much of the paycheck. The good news: you can break out or avoid it entirely. Let's wrap up with clear steps to escape house poor. House poor isn't caused by buying a bad house. It's caused by bad math, when the full costs of ownership, PT plus maintenance plus rising taxes/insurance/utilities exceed what your income can comfortably support without sacrificing lifestyle freedom and future wealth. The trap is real, but it's not inevitable. Here's what you can do right now in 2026. 1. Calculate the full cost before buying. Never look at just principal and interest. Run PTE plus 1.5 to 2% of home value per year for maintenance plus projected increases in taxes/insurance 5 to 15% per year. If the all-in monthly cost eats greater than 35% of gross or greater than 40% of take-home, red flag. 2. Red flag rule. If the monthly difference between owning and renting a similar place is greater than $800 to $1,200 after full costs, implies strongly consider staying a renter and investing the difference. 7 to 9% long-term return. That gap compounds into $150,000 to $400,000 plus over 10 years, often more than home equity after fees. 3. If you're already house poor, escape plan house hack. Immediately rent out rooms, build an ADU or convert basement arrow, cut your net housing cost 30 to 70%. Increase side income. Gig work, freelance, skill up for higher pay, even $500 to $1,000 per month. Extra changes everything. Aggressive budget cuts. Eliminate non-essentials, subscriptions, eating out luxury items to rebuild emergency fund. Refinance if rates drop, watch for 5.5 to 6% window to lower payments. 4. If you haven't bought yet, do it smarter. Prioritize 20% plus down to avoid PMI and lower loan size. Choose growth areas, top 15 to 20% markets where appreciation offsets costs. Build 12 to 18 months emergency fund first. Repairs and life happen. Consider house hacking from day one, duplex, triplex, ADU. Final thought. A house is where you live, not the fastest way to get rich. Financial freedom comes from controlling your cash flow, not letting a house control it. Don't let a $450,000 to $600,000 home steal your options, your peace, or your future. So where are you right now? Are you feeling house poor, already paying a mortgage that's too big? Or still renting and wondering if buying is worth it? Drop a comment with your rough numbers, household income, current rent/mortgage home price, your eyeing city/metro area, down payment saved. I'll give you straight, no fluff feedback on whether you're in the trap or how to avoid it. Thanks for sticking through this. This isn't easy to hear, but it's the truth that can save you years of stress. See you in the next one. Choose freedom, not handcuffs.